It's no secret that I'm a huge Sega fan. I love the Master System, the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, the Sega Saturn, and I like the Dreamcast alright, I guess. But sometimes you just gotta say Nintendo does what Sega don't. And that's why today I'll be taking a look at 6 games where the original 8-bit NES got won over the more powerful 16-bit Sega Genesis. That's right, this isn't a Super Nintendo vs Sega Genesis video. This is the original NES versus a Mega Drive. So let's get started. Batman Return of the Joker was originally created by Sunsoft for the NES, and it is amazing. Not only is it one of the best looking games for the console, it also has an amazing soundtrack and super fun gameplay. You have some really solid platforming sections with tight controls, precision jumping, and fun power-ups. Although I don't quite get why Batman's using a gun. The game is also coupled with some good, if unspectacular shmup levels and interesting one-on-one boss fights. Usually, the main criticism levied against this game is in its difficulty, which, yeah, this game is stupidly difficult. The frustration levels might get you to give up on it, but chances are you'll eventually return to this game due to how good it is. 1 year later, however, the game was brought over to the Sega Genesis as Batman Revenge of the Joker. And you'd think we would get the same game but with better graphics and music, right? Well, sadly, no. Pretty much everything was downgraded here. I should point out though that this version was not created by Sunsoft, but rather it was outsourced to Wrangler Studios, a Western studio whose stellar lineup includes Super Slapshot, Mario Lemieux Hockey, and Hockey for the Atari Lynx. I'm sensing a pattern here. And yeah, this game is it's not good. It's not good at all. For one thing, the art style took a major hit. The NES version used a lot of negative space to give the game a dark and gritty tone, which honestly looks really impressive. But on Sega, Batman looks a lot closer to his Adam West portrayal. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I love Adam West and the 1960s Batman. But it just really does not fit here, because the game is not really trying to be silly. Personally, I think Adam West deserves a far better game. But this one bombed really hard.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
I will at least say that Gotham's rooftops look pretty good art style wise, though I still prefer the darkness of the NES version. Sometimes less is more, and leaving more to the imagination can be a good thing. The music compositions are the same, but it seems the developers weren't really sure on how to handle the Sega Genesis, because the instrumentation often leaves a lot to be desired. Though it's still way better than the awful sound effects. These are some of the screechiest, loudest, and most annoying sound effects you'll ever hear. They're just the worst. Not to mention, the game doesn't even use the Mega Drive secondary sound chip, so you're basically only getting half of the console's audio channels. But the worst part has to be the gameplay. Batman's character is huge, which, to be fair, this was also an issue in the NES version. But here, he's even bigger, and his hitbox is just the worst. I mean, look at this! And the level design was not changed to take into consideration Batman's new hitbox, which makes an already hard game even more difficult. Not to mention that it often feels that the enemies and boxes take a lot more hits to bring down. Just avoid this one if you can. Interestingly enough, a Super Nintendo version of the game was also planned, but never officially released, though the ROM would be eventually leaked onto the internet. And in this one, Batman looks even worse. I mean, what even is this design? The music is a little better than the Sega version and the hitbox isn't quite as bad, but it's still a huge downgrade from the NES original. Ironically, the Game Boy would also get a Batman Return of the Joker game. This one is completely different from any of the previous versions we've seen, though it was made by Sunsoft as well. And yeah, this one is pretty good actually. Not as good as the NES game, but it's still a very good original Game Boy game in its own right. So this is one example where the Mega Drive lost to not just the NES, but also to the Game Boy. Oof, ouch. But then again, the Super Nintendo version also lost to the NES and the Game Boy, so who's the real winner here? Nintendo. That would be Nintendo. Captain America and the Avengers was a beat-em-up released for the arcades with ports to the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. The arcade game was pretty fun, and most seem to agree that the Mega Drive did a good job at bringing the arcade experience home, while the Super Nintendo version was pretty lacking. You get 4 characters to choose from, the game has plenty of voiceovers with hilariously awful dialogue.
You cut a stick! You will be the one escaping!
The action is pretty fun, the music is decent, and it's really fun beating up a lot of Marvel's C-tier villains. I mean, really, how many of you have ever heard of villains like Whirlwind or the Living Laser? And you get to fight all of them in their 80s and 90s designs, so yeah, good game all around. Not the best beat 'em up on the Mega Drive by any means, but still a good game. Now, what you may not know is that when the game was brought over to the NES, instead of trying to replicate the arcade experience, Data East would create an action platformer instead. And I actually think that this version is better than the 16-bit ports we got. Okay, so first the downsides. You can only play as Captain America and Hawkeye. Vision and Iron Man were captured and you need to rescue them, so they're out. Now the good sides. You get a map of the US to explore at your own pace. So this means that some levels can be entirely skipped depending on what path you take. At the start, Hawkeye and Captain America are on the opposite ends of the map, but if you bring them together towards the same level, you can link them up, and from that point forward you can switch between them instantly anytime you pause the game. And the best part is, each one has their own health bar, and they play very differently. Hawkeye has a longer range in his attacks, though they're weaker than Cap's shield. Captain America has a lower range, but is stronger and has several other abilities. He can dash, grab from ledges, use a shield as a platform against water or acid, and even deflect weaker bullets. Yeah, this game is kind of unbalanced in favor of Captain America. The cool thing about this game though is that you can collect these gems and they work like an experience system. Basically, the more you have, the stronger you become, and the more HP you gain. And the best part is that these upgrades are persistent. So yeah, this really is an experience system in an action platformer NES game. Not a lot of titles did that back then. You also get really cool boss fights against enemies like the Mandarin and Ultron. And the best part is the 2-player mode, where you can actually play as the bosses against a friend. As a kid, I thought this was amazing. Being able to play as the bosses was just incredible, especially because they play differently from your regular characters. And it pains me that no one has made a hack of this game where you can play as the bosses throughout the campaign. Now that would have been incredible. But in the end, once again, the NES got a point over the Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo. I guess Nintendo does what Nintendo don't. The Double Dragon for the NES is a classic. I don't think I need to get into this game. If you're into the NES, you've most likely already played this game, or are at least somewhat familiar with it. Well, the game would also come to the Mega Drive courtesy of Accolade under their Ballistic label. And sadly, it didn't exactly set the world on fire. The graphics are slightly downgraded from the arcade, but pretty faithful otherwise, so that's good. But on the other hand, the music can get pretty annoying in places. You know those awful metallic sounds that some Western developers love to jam into their Mega Drive games, but that no one actually liked? Yeah, there's a lot of that here. The worst part though are the controls. I'm not sure how to explain it, but they're weird. They're sluggish, and lining up for an enemy is super difficult. And it's just not fun to play, because you always feel like you're struggling against your inputs. At least this version is pretty easy and way more accessible than the NES version. And I know that the NES version took some major liberties with the game, and not always for the best. I like the NES's light RPG system, in which you unlock more moves as you dispatch enemies, but I've always hated the platforming sections in this, and that's because the jumping never felt like it was made for platforming bits. But in the end, the NES version is considered a classic with good reason, whereas the Sega version is often forgotten, and also with good reason. I mean, just to give you an idea, Streets of Rage 2 came out the same year as the Sega version, so yeah, this game quite simply came out too late. But even if we forget all of that, the NES version is simply more fun to play. Oh boy, it's Blaster Master! Again, just like with Double Dragon, if you're into the NES or retro gaming in general, chances are you've already played this game or at least heard of it. This is Compile's amazing action platformer Metroidvania, in which you control a tank, you can get out of the tank to explore, and you even have these top-down shooting stages. It's basically a classic for the NES. Well, when it was time to make a sequel, Sunsoft decided to hire a third-party developer, Software Creations, responsible for classics like Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Wolverine, Spider-Man and the X-Men Arcade's Revenge, and Double Dragon 3 for the Sega Genesis. Yeah, not a promising lineup there. And as you might expect, they dropped the ball with this one. Although to be fair, they did try to replicate the design of the original, giving you several play styles in a single game. And on a technical level, the graphics were good for an early Mega Drive game. The issue is that this game came out in 1993, so we were a little past early Mega Drive games by then. Not to mention that the muted and drab colors really bring the whole presentation down, if you ask me. And once again, we got a really iffy soundtrack with a lot of those metallic Genesis sounds that we all love to hate. So some of the songs can be a little hard to get through. But I think the worst part here is the level design and enemy design. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that the original Blaster Master was easy or even fair, but I find the difficulty here just so incredibly unfair, with shots often coming at you before you have time to react, and the controls can feel pretty slippery. Some people absolutely revile this game, and while I don't think it's quite that bad, it is a pretty mediocre game, and it's nowhere near as good as the original NES game. Yes, Tetris. Look, I know, but I was running out of games, okay? Just look, Tetris on the NES? Great game. It's fun, fast, has good music, The colors are appealing, it's good. Tetris for the Mega Drive only came out in Japan and then was quickly recalled because it turned out that Sega did not have the rights to it. Although to be fair, this was not Sega's fault. There's a whole story behind that, and honestly it deserves its own video. But the game is now on the Sega Genesis Mini or Sega Mega Drive Mini. And yeah, Tetris for the Mega Drive, it's okay. The gameplay is still there, but the presentation is nowhere near as good. I find the grainy background images kinda boring, and the music is fine but not amazing. I know it's just Tetris, but I think we can all agree that the NES version is just more fun. Oh yeah, now we're getting into controversial territory. Okay, first the Sega version. Castlevania Bloodlines is amazing. I love this game. It's fast, it's bloody, it's gory, it's super fun. You get 2 characters to choose from, multiple paths, multiple endings, an amazing soundtrack, great graphical effects, and the level design is really good. My biggest criticism is how short the game is. With only 5 stages, it really doesn't take long until you've seen everything there is to see. But honestly, that's pretty minor. This is still an amazing game, all things considered. But then you have Castlevania 3, and really, there's just no competition. You've got multiple characters to play as, multiple paths to choose from, you can switch between Trevor and your alternate character with a push of a button, and the game even forces you to choose who you want to bring with you, adding a nice tactical element to each playthrough. The music is incredible, especially if you play the audio-enhanced Famicom version. The graphics are amazing for the 8-bit NES, and I just love how each character plays so differently. It's not like saying Bloodlines or Rondo of Blood, where the characters play somewhat equally with a few minor differences. No, everyone here plays massively different. Of course, that means that some levels may not be properly designed around a specific secondary character, but it happens. So yeah, perhaps saying that this game destroys Castlevania Bloodlines is an exaggeration. I mean, I love Bloodlines, but to me, neither Bloodlines nor Castlevania 4 hold a candle to Castlevania 3, although Rondo of Blood does come close. And there you have it, 6 games in which you're better off playing the NES version over its 16-bit Sega rival. Did you like my picks? Or maybe you have some other games. Maybe there's more games out there where you feel the NES or the Master System surpassed their more powerful successors. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments. And hey, if this video does well, maybe I'll do a sequel in the future. Or maybe I'll even pull a reverse Uno card. I wonder if I can find any games where I'd rather play the Master System version over their Super Nintendo counterparts. Now that would be an interesting video. Hey everyone, thank you for watching Stika's Retro Corner. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell and share this video. All that fun social media stuff. And you can also support me on Patreon. It may not seem like it, but even $1 is a really big help in keeping this channel going. I would also like to thank my high-tier Patreon supporters, Janru, Anthony Ryan Bennett, and Newcade. Thank you for helping make this channel better. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!